The man they underestimated. Elias Monroe checked the time on his wristwatch as he stepped out of his charcoal gray SUV, parked neatly along the curb outside Ironclad National Bank, a sleek glass and steel structure in the heart of downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. The late afternoon sun gleamed off the polished exterior of the building, bright enough that it made him briefly squint as he approached. His hands were casually tucked into the pockets of his plain black hoodie. No suit today. No Italian loafers or custom-tailored slacks. Just a hoodie, jeans, and a pair of running shoes that had seen better days. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Elias had spent 2 decades building his company from scratch. Monroe Equity Group was now a multi-million-dollar investment firm. It had fingers in industries from tech startups to renewable energy. Ironclad National Bank was one of the primary banks handling their accounts. Elias's name was tied to transactions worth more than some regional banks processed in a fiscal quarter. But today wasn't about the numbers. Over the past year, whispers had reached his ears. Subtle complaints. Clients who felt they were treated differently because of their skin color, their appearance, the zip code on their driver's license. Elias wasn't a stranger to these stories. He'd lived them, long before his name ever appeared in Forbes or Fortune. But hearing them now, connected to a financial partner he trusted, unsettled him. And so, instead of sending a member of his executive team, Elias had come himself. No entourage. No business cards. No tailored image. Just a man with a simple question. A cold reception. The automatic doors slid open with a muted hiss as Elias stepped inside. The air conditioning washed over him like a cold tide, and he immediately noticed the sterile scent of commercial cleaning agents. The walls were lined with brushed steel and frosted glass. Sleek, minimalist furniture occupied the waiting area where a few customers sat quietly. Elias surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. At the far counter, an older white gentleman was greeted with a smile by a young teller. They exchanged a few words, the sort of casual, familiar banter Elias had come to expect from good customer service. But as he made his way toward the line, a young woman with auburn hair glanced up from behind another counter. Her expression shifted the instant she saw him. Her professional smile dimmed. The subtle straightening of her posture suggested she was bracing herself. Elias recognized the look. He'd seen it too many times before. He approached the counter and offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. The woman's nameplate read Hannah Curtis. Her answering smile was tight, barely there. "How can I help you?" Elias produced a neatly folded printout of his account statement from the front pocket of his hoodie. "I noticed an unexpected service fee on my business account. I'd like to have it reviewed and corrected." Hannah took the paper gingerly, like she was touching something suspicious. Her eyebrows rose slightly as she scanned the document, though the tension in her jaw didn't ease. "What's the account name?" she asked. "Monroe Equity Group," Elias replied without hesitation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed. A few seconds passed in silence, broken only by the muted clicking of keys. Then she stopped typing. "This is a business account," she said, more as a statement than a question. Elias nodded. "That's right." Her gaze sharpened. "Do you have documentation confirming your authority to act on this account?" Elias resisted the urge to sigh. "My name is on the statement you're holding. That's my account number. I'm Elias Monroe." Hannah didn't blink. "I'll need to see an official business card or additional identification linking you to the account." Elias gestured toward the document again. "You didn't ask the man at the other counter for that," he said quietly. Her lips pressed into a flat line. "This is standard policy for high-value business accounts." It wasn't, and they both knew it. Still, Elias kept his expression neutral as he pulled his wallet from his back pocket and slid his driver's license across the counter. Hannah examined it briefly, then tapped her fingernails against the desk. "I'm going to get my manager," she said curtly. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and walked briskly toward a glass-walled office in the back. Through the glass, Elias watched her speak to a man in his mid-50s. His gray suit was conservative, his hair thinning at the temples. His nameplate read Martin Winslow. As Hannah spoke, Martin's gaze drifted toward Elias, narrowing ever so slightly. The inspection. Elias didn't shift his stance. He stood tall, relaxed, his hands resting lightly on the polished marble counter. But inside, a slow burn had begun. He had walked into hundreds of boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, advised governors, and sat on the boards of major corporations. But right now, in this moment, he was just a black man in a hoodie, standing at a bank counter, being assessed like a threat. Martin approached with measured steps, his smile practiced and polite in a way that reminded Elias of car salesmen. "Good afternoon," Martin began. I understand you have a concern regarding your account? I do, Elias replied calmly. There's an unauthorized service fee. I'd like it reversed. Martin glanced at the statement still on the counter. And what is your relationship to Monroe Equity Group? I founded the company, Elias answered evenly. I'm the CEO. Martin's eyebrows ticked upward for half a second. I see, he murmured. Do you have paperwork to verify that? Elias kept his eyes steady. My name is on the account, on the statement, and on my ID. Martin picked up the license again, as if double-checking for a watermark. Then he set it down. This is a high-value account, he said slowly, so we have to be extra cautious. Cautious, Elias echoed. Is that what we're calling it? Martin didn't respond. Elias leaned forward slightly. You've had my business for years, Mr. Winslow, and this is the first time anyone has questioned my authority over my own account. We're following security procedures, Martin replied, his tone remaining steady. Elias shook his head slowly. You're following assumptions. The silence between them stretched. Hannah shifted behind the counter. A few customers glanced over. One or two lowered their voices, whispering. Call the number attached to the account, Elias suggested. My assistant will confirm everything you need. Martin hesitated. Elias saw it, the brief flash of uncertainty. But the manager didn't pick up the phone. Instead, he said, Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. Elias blinked, taken aback. His voice hadn't changed. He hadn't raised it even slightly. My voice is perfectly normal, he said evenly. You're causing discomfort, Martin insisted. And there it was. Elias had seen it before. He was no longer a client. He was now a disturbance. The escalation. Elias remained where he was, his hands still resting lightly on the counter. If I'm causing discomfort, he said, it's because you've decided I don't belong here. Martin shook his head, as if dealing with a stubborn child. You need to leave. No, Elias replied. I'm not leaving until this is resolved. Martin sighed heavily and signaled to a security guard near the door. The man, a broad-shouldered figure with a shaved head, approached without hurry, his badge reading T. Benson. Sir, Benson said quietly, we're going to have to ask you to leave. On what grounds? Elias asked, still calm. You're making the staff uncomfortable. Elias felt his jaw clench. That's not a crime. It's enough, Benson said simply. Elias stood his ground. I'm here about my own money. That's not a disturbance. But then Benson reached out and took hold of Elias's arm. The grip was firm, unnecessary. Remove your hand, Elias said, his tone low. Benson didn't. And then, without warning, Martin Winslow reached out and slapped Elias across the face. The sound echoed in the bank's quiet space. Hannah gasped. Someone muttered, Oh my God. And then Elias felt the cold bite of metal handcuffs clamping around his wrists. The fall. Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't yelling. But here he was, restrained like a criminal, paraded in front of the very people he trusted his business with. Martin stepped back, rubbing his palm. Call the police, he told Hannah. She hesitated, her fingers trembling over the keypad. You sure you want to do this? Elias asked, his voice quiet. Martin didn't answer. Hannah made the call. 2 squad cars arrived within minutes. Officers stepped inside, taking in the scene. A black man in handcuffs, a bank manager who looked as though he'd been assaulted, and a nervous security guard standing nearby. What's the situation? The lead officer asked. Martin spoke first. The man caused a disturbance and became aggressive. Elias shook his head. That's a lie. The officer asked for his name. Elias Monroe. He saw the shift immediately, the realization. The officer turned to Hannah. That ID on the counter? She slid it over, saying nothing. The officer's jaw tightened as he read the name. Then he turned to Martin. You slapped him. Martin hesitated. I was defending myself. From what? The officer asked dryly. The officer turned to Benson. Take the cuffs off. For a long moment, Benson didn't move. Then, reluctantly, he obeyed. The call. Elias rubbed his wrists as he took back his ID. Then he pulled out his phone. Martin's face paled as Elias dialed. Graham, Elias said when the line picked up. I'm at Ironclad National's Raleigh branch. We have an issue. Graham Walters, the bank's regional director, was silent for half a beat. What kind of issue? Elias outlined it simply, plainly. I'll be there in 15 minutes, Graham said. And he was. When Graham arrived, he didn't waste time. Martin was fired on the spot. Benson was told to turn in his badge. Hannah was placed on immediate probation. Graham stood in front of the remaining staff. If any of you believe what happened today was acceptable, he said, you're welcome to leave now. No one moved. Elias watched it all without satisfaction, without pride, only with certainty. He walked out of the bank an hour later, the sun still bright, but the world feeling different. Because next time, it might be someone without his power, without his resources. And that wasn't acceptable. Not anymore.